Hi, welcome back to my channel. This week I'm going to be talking about some of the nuances on surfing as a beginner and some of the things that maybe the pros won't be able to remember to tell you about when you're first learning. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get into it. One of the really difficult things for me as a beginner surfer was reading the waves and figuring out which ones to go for and which ones not to go for. And this is really difficult because when you're a beginner and you know nothing about the ocean, all of the waves look the same. And so it can be really difficult to determine which waves are going to be good to ride and which ones are better off just letting them roll past you. And a lot of this depends on your position in the ocean and how far away or close you are to a wave, and a lot of it also depends on your capabilities. If you're a more advanced surfer, you might be able to take off later than someone who's a beginner, or you might be able to take off more closer to the peak as an advanced surfer than a beginner surfer would, because the closer you are to the peak, oftentimes it means that you have to react a lot faster and pop up. So this is something that took me a long time to figure out, and also the conditions of the waves. So whether they're mushy or peaky, that also has a lot of effect on exactly where you're going to take off on the wave. If you're too much in the peak and it's going really fast, you're just going to get clobbered by that wave. And if you're too far out on the shoulder, you're going to keep paddling and paddling and paddling and not get into the wave. And you're going to be wasting a lot of energy going for waves that you should just not be going for. As a beginner, I remember feeling really frustrated trying to learn how to surf from my husband. He is a very good surfer and had been surfing for about 10 years when I first started surfing about 3 years ago. And I remember feeling very discouraged out in the water that I couldn't catch waves, and everyone made it look super easy. And surfing is just that. It is to try to make something that is very hard look very easy. And so don't be discouraged if you feel like you're going out and trying to catch even the whitewash and you're struggling to stand up or catch it. It's normal. Everyone goes through it. You just have to keep trying and something will click eventually. As a beginner, often you dream of catching a green wave, which would be an unbroken wave, out in the lineup. And this is every surfer's dream. But when you're first beginning, it's really important that you start off in the whitewash, because when you're beginning, you're wanting to go for quantity over quality. I'm not saying that you just paddle for really crappy waves, but you're just wanting to try to catch as many waves as possible to practice learning how to pop up and surf the wave. If you keep spending all of your time just trying to catch the perfect wave, 9 times out of 10 you're going to try to catch it and miss the wave, and then you've wasted a lot of valuable time that you could have been spending trying to catch smaller waves or whitewash. I think all of us have heard of rip currents, but I don't think all of us know exactly what they are, or if you do, it's a different story when you find yourself in one out in the surf. And it's really important that you remember to stay calm and you remember exactly what you're supposed to do if you're in a rip current. Rip currents can happen different directions on the beach, or they can pull you out to sea. If you are in a rip current, it is best to paddle parallel to the beach. You don't want to be freaking out and trying to paddle back into the beach, because it's actually just going to wear you out and the rip current is going to continue to pull you out. Most of the beaches around here in San Diego that I know of don't have super strong currents, at least not the ones I surf, but you can still notice it sometimes depending on the wave conditions. And I have actually myself been stuck in a rip current on my boogie board. And it can be a very scary feeling, and panic starts to set in, and you just have to remind yourself to stay calm. Staying calm is really important when you're surfing. And just remember to paddle parallel to the beach until you're sure you're out of the rip current, and then you can try to take one of the waves in to get back to the beach. If you're stuck in a rip current that is pulling you either direction, I would suggest just trying to get out of the water so that it doesn't keep pulling you further and further in either direction. Sometimes when you're surfing, if the current is bad and is pulling to the left or the right, I have often had times where I've had to just get out of the water, walk down the beach, and get back out where I'm supposed to be. This is why it's really important that you are picking an object on the beach that you know when you paddle out you are in line with, and you can tell if you're being pulled either left or right on the beach. Another thing that I didn't know as a beginner surfer that is really important to surfing is tides and wind have a lot to do with how the waves are going to be. If the tide is high, often depending on the spot, it'll be mushier, and if the tide is low, it'll be more closed out. And often a lot of places it's best to surf them at a middle tide, but again, this is why it is really important that you do research on the beach that you're going to, because it just depends on the beach and what kind of beach it is, if it's reef or sand, and exactly how the ground is under the water will really determine how the tides will affect it. So for balancing and paddling on a surfboard, you want to be parallel, like the board should be parallel with the water so that you have the most efficiency for paddling and also trying to catch the wave. If you're too far forward, you're going to nosedive, and if you're too far back, you're going to try to catch the wave, and here's you as the board and here's the wave. The wave is going to try to pick you up, and if you're too far back, it's going to keep tipping the top part of your board, and the wave will just go right underneath of you. If you're too far forward, then the wave is just going to slam you down. So you want to be as parallel with the water as you can, and ideally you should try to pop up as quickly as possible. However you can do that while having the most amount of balance is up to you. The best way to do it is quickly and explosive, but if you're not able to do that, as most beginner surfers are not, just try to get to your feet as best as you can while staying balanced. I would recommend not going to your knees. I started doing that habit, especially if the waves were a little bigger than I was comfortable surfing in, and it's a really, really bad habit that's very difficult to break. So try to get to your feet as soon as possible and not go to your knees. As I've mentioned this in a previous video, it's really important that your strokes are long and deep, and that you're using the whole length of your arm from your fingers to your elbow to paddle. You don't want to be out here paddling like that on your surfboard. You want to be going down deep and pulling back and then alternating arms. This will give you the most amount of power from your strokes and help you to get further in the water and have more strength to paddle into the wave. Another really big nuance thing that I did not learn until maybe 6 months into learning how to surf is how important it is to angle your takeoff, but not only angling your takeoff, assessing the wave and figuring out how much you should be angling your takeoff. Sometimes it might be very little, and sometimes it might be a lot. This is something that you will just learn with time as you're riding more and more green waves. If the wave is mushy and small, you're going to want to just paddle straight towards the beach to try to catch it, and then at the last moment as you're popping up, angle your board just slightly so you're cruising down the line. But if the waves are closing out or really fast, they're breaking really quickly, then you're going to want to paddle and angle your board in the direction of the wave you're going to try to ride. So you will paddle, and then you'll angle so that the board is going in the direction that the wave is going, and then you try to pop up and continue down that line so you can stay on that wave as long as possible. And I know this might seem simple to some more intermediate or advanced surfers, but for me as a beginner, that was really instrumental in helping me figure out how to stay caught up with the wave instead of getting caught back in the whitewash. As I mentioned before, with your pop-up technique, there's a lot of videos out there, and maybe I'll do one on different techniques for popping up. But you just want to try to find the quickest way that you can get to your feet while staying balanced and centered on your board. So whatever method you decide to do, just don't start with going onto your knees, because like I said, that's a very hard habit to break. But once you are on the board, you want to be upright as you're looking the direction that you're trying to ride the wave. You don't want to have your butt sticking out and your arms over here, because that's just going to actually throw you off balance. Despite the fact that it might feel more balanced, it's just going to throw off your weight. So you want to try to stay as centered on the board as you can, with your knees slightly bent, your back foot perpendicular with where the board is, and your front foot at a slight angle, and then having your shoulders facing the direction you're trying to ride the wave. I have a whole video on the rules of surf etiquette, but just to summarize it here a little bit for the video, these are unspoken nuances that every surfer should know out in the water. If you don't follow anything else, these are the things you should definitely know if you're going to be paddling out into the water or the lineup. Right away is the first one, and this one is if the wave is breaking and someone is here closer to the peak and you are here, this first surfer has priority to catch the wave first because they are closer to the peak. If they don't catch it, then you can try to catch it. But if they are paddling for it, do not paddle for it, because it's just going to probably end in a collision and you're just going to be frustrated at each other, and we don't want any bad blood out in the lineup. We are all there to have fun and catch some waves. Also, the surfer who is further out in the lineup has priority over those who are on the inside. When you're first beginning to surf, being on the inside is actually really helpful because it's usually less crowded, but you don't want to be paddling for a wave that someone else is paddling for first. Another big no-no is don't drop in on someone. If someone is already riding a wave, you should not paddle in to try to catch that wave. You're going to ruin their ride, you're probably going to ruin your ride, and it's just really not good to drop in on someone. Another one is to be smart about how you're paddling out. You don't want to be paddling out where everyone is trying to catch the waves, because again, you're going to probably ruin their ride and you put both them and yourself at risk for getting hit from a surfboard. And you just ideally should paddle around where someone is surfing. Sometimes there's situations where timing is poor and it's inevitable, but you should try it as best as you can to avoid putting yourself and others in danger. So if someone is on a wave and riding it, you should try to find the path that is least likely to get in their way. If that means going around the wave before it comes and breaks at you where you're at, then paddle as hard as you can to get out of that way. If they are coming down the line and the fastest way for you to get out of their way is to paddle the other direction and then go over the whitewash, then do that. It's good to just not try to cut someone off by paddling out. Again, it just makes things negative, and things happen, accidents happen. Sometimes, like I said, the timing is poor. The best thing you can do in that situation is try to get their attention gently and apologize for getting in their way. And most people understand that it's not something that you could have done, or if it is something you could have done, then you learn from it next time. And it's just nice to apologize. Most people are very gracious about it. It just helps that camaraderie in the lineup and just helps kind of make sure that no one is having any negative feelings towards each other out in the water. If I could use just a few words to sum up all of these tips, it would be just to be respectful of those out in the water. Don't hog waves if you're a good surfer. Don't be getting in people's way if you're a kook. And I know I've definitely gotten in people's way, but just try to be gracious about it. One thing that is super important, but sometimes really hard to remember when you're first learning how to surf, is to try to just remain calm out in the water. Ideally, you should be surfing in conditions that match your skill level, so the waves should not be too overwhelming if you're paddling out. But one thing to remember if you're in a scenario where you nose dove and you're going underwater, or you're being held under a little longer than you thought, is to remember your ABCs. This is something that my husband told me, and it's really helpful when you are in the moment and just kind of getting freaked out about the situation. Your ABCs are always be cool. So always try to remember to just relax. If you wipe out, try to relax, because your body will lose more oxygen and energy if you're freaking out and panicking. And the amount of time that you'll probably be under the water is usually a lot less than it feels like it actually is. So just try to remain calm and try to have fun out in the water. It's great. Surfing is so awesome. One other thing to remember is if you wipe out, you should always try to protect your head with your arms and try to prevent your board from hitting you in the head. It's inevitable that you're going to get hit with your board at some point during your surfing journey, but ideally you should not be getting hit in the head with your board. So covering your head is really important if you're wiping out or you're going underwater or you're coming off a wave, because I've had times where I've hit the bottom of the ocean because the tide was low, and instead of my head hitting the floor, it was my arm, which is a whole lot better than your head hitting the floor. So one thing as a beginner that you should not be surfing without is a leash. It is really important as a beginner that you have a leash. I think it is important for every surfer to have a leash, but especially as a beginner, your leash is your lifeline to your board. If you're out in the surf and you have a leash, you can get your board back to you. It also prevents your board from hitting other people. I've definitely had times where I've almost been hit by someone's board because they were surfing on a smaller day without a leash. So it's really important that you have a leash and that you're also aware of where your leash is around yourself. It's easy to get caught up or tangled up in your leash. I've had my leash wrap around my foot and a wave pull the board. So it's just really important, even also when you're trying to pop up and take off, to be aware that your leash is out of the way in the water so that you're not going to get tangled up in it as you're surfing. It's also really important if you have a fiberglass board, but even if you have a foam board, to have some wax on there because it helps maintain your grip, not only for your hands but for your body as you're paddling out in the water. So it's really important that you have clean wax that is well put on there, and maybe in the future, if you're interested, I could do a video of re-waxing my fiberglass board for a little tutorial on how to do that. But it's really important that you have clean wax on your board so that it is easy to ride and easy to hang on to. Also, the amount of fins on your board makes a huge difference on how the board is going to respond to being ridden in the waves. If you have one fin, it's going to make turning sharper a little easier, but it'll still provide a lot of stability because usually one fin setups are big fins. If you have two fins, it's important to know that that actually makes the board a lot more maneuverable, which is good if you're an experienced surfer, but if you're a beginner surfer, a twin fin setup is not ideal. The most typical for beginner boards, like foam boards, is a thruster 3-fin setup. And this is really great because it provides a lot of stability in the water, because the fin is what holds you in the water as you're riding the wave, but it also provides the mobility of being able to turn, but it adds a lot of stability to your surfboard as you're trying to catch and ride the waves. The last one is something that's been really close to my heart lately, and that is the mindset of you as a beginner surfer. It is so important to remember that surfing is hard, and I know I say that a lot on this channel, but I think that is something that is really important to remember, because there's going to be days where it's really difficult and you are just like, why am I doing this? Why am I out here? And there's other days where you're out there and you're just having a blast. So I think it's really important that, especially on the difficult days, you try to find something to be grateful for or something to appreciate about being in the ocean, even if it's just getting out in the water, getting some exercise, getting in the ocean. It always improves my mood to go out surfing. So it's really important to remember to try to keep your mindset centered on the fact that this is hard, you can do it, and things will fall into place and click the more and more you do it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful for you to have some of those nuances of learning how to surf as a beginner. I know they are definitely tips I wish I had when I was first beginning to learn how to surf, and would have really helped me get some perspective on exactly what I should be doing out in the lineup and some of the mindset that I should be having as I'm learning how to surf, because it is hard, but you can do it, and surfing is such an amazing sport. It's such an amazing activity, and you will be really rewarded the more you stick with it and the more you progress. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.